Okay, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, welcome. Welcome to the Festival of Futurecity, part of Bristol's annual Festival of Ideas. My name is Peter Brill. I'm a trustee of Salaam Shalom. And I've also been privileged to be one of the people that conducted some of the interviews that you're going to see tonight. And it genuinely was a privilege to talk to some of this city's greatest influencers, community-based influencers, people who've made a genuine difference to the way communities act and think and make change. We have been very lucky to have sponsorship and support from the Heritage Lottery Fund that has enabled us to do this. We'll explain a little bit more about where these interviews will eventually land. I also, on behalf of the festival, would like to recognise their sponsors, the British Council and the University of the West of England, and thank you to them. This is an extraordinary festival, and we as an organisation are very privileged to be given this platform, and I'm delighted to see so many people here tonight. Thank you so much for coming. On our panel tonight, we have a selection of the influencers that you will see in the film that you're going to see in a minute. And I will introduce them afterwards. A reminder also that if you're into the snap face, into chat, social media thing, then please join in the debate. You can do it on hashtag Futurecity19. That's Futurecity19. And we'd welcome, obviously, any conversation online as well. What I want to do is start with just a taste, really, of the content of the full videos. Each influencer was interviewed for a length of time, and the interviews themselves are about an hour long, between 40 minutes and an hour long. But this is just a taste of some of that.
I'm Martin Vigoda, and I currently live in Bristol. I was actually born in London. I was born during the war, and because of the bombing in central London, had to be delivered in what was, I think, a nursing home for elderly people around the corner from where my parents lived.
I was born and bred in Singapore, yes. So I came to England when I got married. My husband came down, and it's an arranged marriage. And I arrived in England in March 1977. Yeah.
Abdul Wahab, MBE.
My name's Madge Judith Dresser, and I'm nearly 70, and I was born in Los Angeles, but I came to England when I was 20, and came to Bristol in 1972, and have never left.
Hello, I'm Amir Chima.
Well, I came to Bristol, I think it was 1969.
I'm Kalsoom Bashir. I'm almost 55 years old. I've lived in Bristol for 30 years, so Bristol's very much my home now.
Simi Chowdhury. My name is Claire Sandler, and that's who I am.
Muhammad Al-Sharif. My name is Alex Schlesinger, and I am the president of Bristol Hebrew Congregation.
I born Somaliland, outskirts of the city Hargeisa. I'm Somalilander and also call myself a British.
I'm a very free-spirited person. I'm an activist, and I didn't want to be, feel like, be restrained,
I picked up very early on the notion that there are people in life who aren't as advantaged as others.
And whatever our religion, whatever our opinion is later. But first and foremost, we are all human beings.
Prejudice is based on ignorance, and in order to challenge that ignorance, you have to educate.
And also growing up with Holocaust survivors, you just sort of knew that bad things could happen to people because of their ethnic or racial origin.
You know, when you are a refugee, when you will know are you going to be alive or not, What you need to know, what you need as a young age is somebody to say, it's okay, you know, you'll be fine.
People who've been through that period, particularly people who've been in the camps. I mean, my uncle was in Auschwitz and then Dachau, and other people I've met in Leicester who'd been through the various camps. They were talking little tiny bits about it, but they would never sit down and tell you the whole story, you know, from beginning to end. I suspect not only was it painful, but I think there was probably a sense of humiliation as well.
But the reality is we had a difficult time in our countries, and we've been welcomed, we've been adopted, we've been given opportunity in the UK. We should be proud, we should be, I think, more keen to protect the country than anybody else.
For us to remember that anti-Semitism is still a very important, significant issue.
We cannot go back to our countries anymore. We got to live in this country. So if we live here for a generation, we need something for ourselves.
To empower the women, families and children in Bristol, Asian, because they just didn't fit in. Also to make the English people aware of how to treat them, what are their needs.
It's just fantastic when you hear the progress of these students, and we've actually helped them along and pushed them actually to do something for themselves and go on to
beyond their imagination that they could come out, Asian ladies can come out, learn and then get employment. So that's a huge thing for us.
And it gives young people confidence and life skills while they're having fun and adventure and making lots of friends and enjoying themselves as well. So yeah, so that's sort of, as part of BMCS, Bristol Muslim Culture Society, we sort of realised we needed something else, and that's where we got learnt about scouting.
And that led me into community work, really, because I actually realised that a lot of women were actually being oppressed in the name of Islam.
And I did some of the first Black Studies courses, including one taught by Angela Davis. And it was the time of the mid-60s when segregation, which was, you know, very much de facto segregation in terms of residence, and you didn't see black people serving behind counters and things like that. And that was beginning to crack.
We are a community voluntary organization, so we are non-profit making.
I got interested in politics, political philosophy, single subject philosophy, and that's what I got into university to study. I think there was an intake of 10 at Leicester University that year.
Within the community, the need was really at home.
And we did. We set up this amazing internet radio station, Salaam Shalom, Salaam Shalom Radio.
So how can I empower women, especially Somali women, to go out there and they can learn English, and at the same time they got a skill they can offer to the wider community.
I had trouble in the Sudan practicing, journalism, as you know, in the country. And while we just have this interview, there are some protests in the country. So tens of journalists were or are detained now as we speak.
And I said, I really don't care. I'd rather die serving the community. Till this day, I believe in that.
And the fact that, the more you hide these issues, you brush them under the carpet or the prayer mat, they would get worse.
But I love to do interfaith work. I love to be, I think it's really, really important. We were talking earlier, even if I'm not doing something wonderful, I'm there and I'm a presence.
So that community spirit of working closely together across all faiths in Scouting exists, and that's fantastic. And it's about doing things together and working closely together.
My mission, because I always felt I had a mission about civil rights. I really did feel that.
When people come together as people, trust me, all these differences disappear. I mean, you call it. And I think it's just about getting people to connect as people.
So I'll be very, very sad if the voluntary sector was coming to an end, or if City Council didn't realize that these voluntary sector organizations are very important to enhance their work.
And everybody's trying to see what else, just, if we can help them. They sometimes think, why have you rang us? Surely, we can't be meeting everybody's needs, but it feels like that sometimes.
We also now support through our home care service Somali, as well as Egyptian, Iraqi, and so we don't turn people away.
The Orthodox community was about 120 families, something like that, 150 families maybe. I went to a private school in Bristol. For most of the time, I was the only Jewish boy there.
Nobody has a monopoly on God. It would be very, very arrogant for me to say that as a Muslim, God is for me alone.
And make sure all the young people have a fantastic time. And as long as they're growing and developing, that's the sort of what I would like to see, that we have a great community that's working closely together and supporting each other. Yeah.
There's a great sort of feminist urge, if you like, in this community. There's also a very strong ecologically aware urge in this community.
That Notre Dame Mosque, it was a church and it was for sale, and we managed to buy it.
So one of the earliest things I did was to document the story of the racial discrimination on the buses against West Indians.
There was pin drop silence after her story, and I thought, I've had it. But 2 minutes later, there was a standing applause.
It's wonderful to see when somebody takes up our services and we've made a real impact on their life.
I remember a child coming to the play scheme, and the first day, Mum and Dad were holding him. Oh, he can't walk. And they wouldn't leave him. I think he was 6 at the time, and oh no, he might fall over. He's never done this before. He does. Oh gosh, he can't climb this, and he can't do this. And I think within a few weeks, they couldn't believe that was the same boy.
I said, can you please tell me what is it that we do for you? And they all said that you looked after us. So Dekbal is the translation is looking after.
To really defeat the negative coverage of the Muslim communities, to show the true Muslim peaceful religion, and how as Muslims we are part of these cities, we are not outsiders.
All programs were researched and developed by Muslims and Jews working together, collaborating on the research and the presentation of programs.
And at the end of the day, religion has got to be relevant and contextualised to the society in which we live. Otherwise it becomes irrelevant. We've got to be able to apply it.
To me, it's about kindness and compassion and being good to people.
Jane Austen, she recommended my name to the Queen.
I mean, we have some very fine Torah scrolls, silver ornaments, which these days sadly are packed away because they are so valuable, but they're almost certainly bought by the Jacobs family.
The thing I achieve is when I put somebody in ease who's got, struggling, and I say, it's okay, it's not that bad, we can do this, and I know for sure I can help. I think that's my biggest achievement.
I was increasingly of the opinion that we really needed to reach out more from synagogue to other groups, and particularly to the Muslim groups. And that's why I joined Salaam Shalom.
So yes, the sort of seeds are growing slowly. There's still a lot of work to be done, and I'd hope that yes, we would be working very closely together as a great positive community. Yeah.
And then when it came to leaving, when I had to leave, and I thought, leaving and going to London, I just fell in love with Bristol all over again.
If you have a passion, and if you have a vision and you want to achieve, I'm sure you will get the energy to do it.
And I hope to the very end, diversity will be our biggest success.
This series of interviews, of which I'm one, because I've held at the back of my mind for a long time that there are people in the Muslim community and in the Jewish community who've done masses for their own community, and it hasn't necessarily been recognised by their own community or by the wider world in Bristol. And the fact that we can put some of these people's work on record is very important to me. I'm delighted that we were able to persuade the Heritage Lottery Fund, thank you Heritage Lottery Fund, for the monies to be able to do this work.
So I have found my identity as well. You know, not that I didn't have one, but I have found more, and I found that very fulfilling and very enriching. Yeah.
Then the ugliness that we see in the world can't be from God's law. So we have to interpret that in a way that brings justice and equality to everyone on this earth.
And there's things that we can do while we're alive, but then there's what one can leave behind is something that's continual charity. So that we set organizations and things up to support people while we're alive and to continue afterwards.
You must not live for yourself. You know, life is about contributions and giving as well.
To be honest, I just want to empower our communities, whoever they are, regardless white or black or, you know, we are beyond our color, our religious, our belief, our language, our history. We're human beings.
Nobody can change you, but you can change yourself. And then see people around you will also change.
So to share that with other people and to work with other people is it's kind of instinctive, really. If I receive a gift, I want to share that.
And realities are that we've got to be tolerant to each other. That is my philosophy.
Before I do my thank yous, is all right? No, I'm going to invite you up. Zira Haq, Saeed Khan, Mohammed El Sharif, and Chairman and fellow Trustee of Salaam Shalom, Martin Vagoda. Side. It seems to have worked out sort of gender bias. It wasn't meant to be that way, but that's the way it's worked out. Also, just to say that some of you may have been expecting Claire Sandler to have joined us. Unfortunately, due to family circumstances, she sends her apologies and is unable to make it tonight. I've got a couple of thank yous to make before we start. You saw on the video some names that came up, but in particular Milo Clenshaw and James Saunders from Bristol University, who put an immense amount of work into the filming of this project, and we are really delighted with what's been done, so thank you to them. Also to our subtitlist and post-production assistant, Glenn Wayman, who is one of the camera people at the back, and I should say this is being filmed tonight. In fact, because of the position of the cameras, your faces won't be shown, but if you're not comfortable with being filmed, please, if you could just let somebody know from Festival of Ideas, they'll make sure that the edit is such that you won't be included. So I'd like to thank Glenn and his team who are here tonight. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank our project manager and cat herder-in-chief. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to herd her own cats tonight, so she can't come. She's not here to join us, but Victoria Bailey, who was the project manager for Influencers and who really kept it on track, kept the cats herded, and it was a task in getting everyone in the right place at the right time. So a huge thank you to her as well. If you want to see the full videos, you will be able to see them. We're currently in the process of getting them into a place where we can put them on the Salaam Shalom website, which is www.salamshalom.org.uk. There is a clip there, and we're going to put tonight's film on there in the next day or so, and we should have all the videos up there in the very near future. But they will also be stored on the Bristol Archives, in the Bristol Archives and on MShed, and we are waiting for the acknowledgement from them that it's on their websites as well. So there will be different places. We have your email addresses. We know where you live, so we're going to be able to tell you exactly where they'll be and when you can reach them. But that will be within the next week or so. So, our panellists, I'm going to start with a couple of questions before I throw things open to you. And the first question actually was partly stimulated by, I don't know if any of you were at Marvin Rees's State of the City speech last night, but he gave a very powerful talk about his vision for the city and the future, the city of the future, but also there was a panel subsequent to that with some very articulate opinions from around the globe. And one of the panelists talked about cities being the force that heals the wounds caused by national, international institutions and politics, which is interesting. This localization is an important part of bringing communities together and healing the wounds. So my question, I guess, first of all, and I'll start at this end and work along, Saika, have we reached a point, do you think, where community-based action, whether it's faith or other communities, is now more effective than that taken by local authorities, by NHS, by other organisations? Or do you think it's a bit of both in influencing social attitudes?
I think it's a bit of both. Because I think where a lot of the things Bristol City Council, I'm going to talk about Bristol itself, where Bristol City Council hasn't been able to do, they've passed over to the communities, and I think the communities have been very proactive in, different organisations have been very proactive in what they do, and they've, oh good God.
Do you see that as being a negative thing, or do you see that as just being the fact that a city council, an organisation, just has too much to do?
I think Bristol City Council has got too much to do, and I mean the way that, I mean our particular organisation, where it is now, where it used to be, we had a lot of help from Bristol City Council many years ago, and over the years that help has decreased, and I think they want us to be survive on our own, and I think we are achieving that, but future, don't know.
Okay.
Because a lot of the funding that we receive, some of it is from Bristol City Council, and some of it is through private funds. And what we're finding now is that private funds, it's very hard.
Zira.
Yeah, we have come a long way. Dekbal is a voluntary organization, and there are many other organizations out there who have been set up to fulfill gaps within local authority provision. So I have to say that the collaboration work between us and the local council, including the NHS, has come to a point where I think we are now much more in terms of, what was the question again? Yeah.
In terms of developing social action.
Much more developed in social action. Because a lot of these organizations, particularly those in the voluntary sector, I can speak about my organization, it was developed through social action because there was an unmet need in the community for a long time. And so we had to do something because we know local council were not going to do anything. And so we all got together collectively, the community, the South Asian community. And then we lobbied the city council, and then also try to draw their attention about how a community have to work together, especially diverse community, and that we are not to be seen like a burden, but we are to be seen as enriching a community, So the richness that we can bring to the community, and that's about the community cohesion. So people talk about community cohesion now, but we've been doing this from day one since we started.
So, Mohammed, you have a foot in, you've had it, and still have a foot in both camps, if you like, as both a community activist and also working with both NHS and Bristol City Council. What's your feeling about where the two things sit?
Yeah. I think I would start with my personal experience. I think the social actions and community-led action is the default for me, coming back from a country where community-built hospitals and schools and, even funerals and marriages, it was all community arranged, they're all community organized. So the social action and the community-led action is the default for me. And I think that's influenced my work and my life, up to now. And I think in Bristol, there is a fantastic community actions and social actions happening in the city. I I mean, I can sit here till, next year, really listing the good work happening by communities and all the work Zahra and Saig and, and a lot of people here do is about social action, about communities. I think with the issues around the council and the NHS, and I can say that because I think the Bristol City Council default now is supporting social actions, working with communities, because communities are the experts. I mean, I'm not talking about social action is that Bristol City Council discharging their responsibility to communities. It's about partnership. It's about also resourcing the voluntary sector to be able to function and work. So it is about really acknowledging, that work. The voluntary sector is the I think the crucial role to solve lots of problems. The council see the solution within the communities, and I think all we need to ensure that there is enough resources, and there's no, and the council just work to facilitate this, and support and resource the voluntary sector to be able to do that. I mean, this is when we're talking about the organised community work, but there is a social action which happens through individuals, street cleanings, people who are looking after each other in their neighbourhoods. That's the social actions happening in Bristol a lot. I mean, we're all part of this, and I think we need to make sure we do more of that, because this is the default for me.
Martin.
Yeah, but I think we have to be careful that we don't let those state organisations pass the buck to the community and say, you do it. Yes. Because I think, as people have said, it's a partnership. I'm very aware from the interviews that many organisations noted how much support they'd had from former Avon County Council and then Bristol City Council originally, and you've just mentioned that, Saika, but that's much, much harder. It's often support saying, do this. I'm reminded that several of our interviews, people told us that they get referrals, inappropriate referrals from both the local authority and the health service. So I think we have to take, if we're going to develop these community organisations, and I echo absolutely what you say, they are crucial. I'm also amazed by what people, my forebears here in Bristol from the Jewish community and the people I know from the Muslim and the African Caribbean community, came, settled themselves, immediately saw there were needs in their community, and set about meeting those needs. And I just think that's very, very important. It's going to continue. The nice thing about it is that many of those organisations that were set up initially for one cultural group are now providing that same service for other cultural groups in the city. And I think that's crucial, the way that we continue to develop and build. And we have to make sure, I think, that happens in communities. I'm reminded that having recently visited Derry, or Londonderry, being told that because people are moving out from that area within the city walls where they jostled cheek by cheek, even if they may not have liked it, with people from a different background, they're now moving out beyond the walls into what you might call today's ghettos. And I think that's really dangerous. I think we need to make sure that we encourage a much more cross-board living community if our cities and Bristol is going to develop.
Thank you, Martin. One of the things that came across in the interviews, and again, some of the things that you've said, is there's still much to do. And certainly in your own stories, you've come, in some cases, from situations of difficulty and hardship. Your stories demonstrate just how much determination you've had to overcome to get your organisations to where they've needed to be, and overcoming barriers. And some of those have been from within your own communities. What is it that makes development such a hard task? What makes it so hard within your own communities?
It's quite difficult. Because, initially, the organisation I work for is called HAAS. We were established in 1987, so we've been running for over 30 years now. And I can rightly say to this day it is still very hard for us to reach out to a family, gain their trust and get them to actually use our organisation's facilities. I mean, I don't know, maybe they think we're alien or something, we're going to abduct the child and take it away, but we used to have a young carers group, which unfortunately folded because we had no funding, but to get the trust from the parents to allow their young daughters and sons to come into the community centre just for an hour to 2 hours to do an activity, to do an art session, maybe to do a cooking session, it was very hard. You have to sort of like gain the trust of the family. That could be, I mean, just by talking to them, engaging with them. That could take several months, and then they allow their child to come, and then all of a sudden that stops, and then we're back to square one. So if we were to start a service like this, I know we would have a lot of difficulty building up that trust again and establishing it. With the children, I mean, with the referrals we're getting from social services and everything, we go along with the social workers and meet the families. And I think with them coming through with a white organisation, the trust is a little bit more. But for them to come straight to us as an Asian organisation, I don't know what the barriers are. We speak their language. We assure them that we will look after their child, but there are some barriers that are still there. I know we do overcome them eventually, but the initial step is always very, very hard for us as well as the parents.
So, Zira, is it just a cultural issue within communities of overcoming those barriers, or is it simply the type of issues that that your organisations are dealing with?
I will echo some of what Saika said. Initially it was about fear about our community assimilating into the Western culture, losing their values, So we had to work with this community. We had to give reassurances to all family members, not just the person who want to access our service, but work in a holistic way with maybe if there's a parent or the grandparent, this is our culture, yeah. But so we've come a long way, and for us in Dekbal, we see a lot of progress being made because people have come with one shared vision, and that's about community. What is important to them and to their family. So I see we have made a lot of progress, and we've taken the community with us, not just the South Asian community. We do a lot of collaborative work with other communities as well, because we are not one faith group community. We are where the Dekbal is very multi-faith and multicultural, and so we celebrate that diversity. So I feel a lot of those barriers have been broken down, and and we can see the future is good. But we still have to do a lot of our struggle with local authority, but we are not grant-aided anymore. So they need us more than we need them. Yes, they need us because they want to get people into homes from hospital, early discharge from hospital, less and less resources within social services. So it's about how they can access community and voluntary organization like us that provide value for money. So if they fund us, for an example, £30, we are worth to them £100 because we enhance by raising money from elsewhere and to develop lots of other activities to promote people's health and well-being so that they can live longer, have a healthy life, and contribute to the community.
And I know that your chair, who couldn't be here tonight, wanted to sort of reinforce that message, and we'll come back to that. Mohammed, briefly, you told me a story a while ago when we first started this project about talking to the right people, about organisations talking to the right people, who to reach within the communities. And there's an element of actually not necessarily knowing who the people are that are the influencers or the right people to talk to.
Yeah, and I think just following on from that discussion, I think communities organise themselves in a way, I think it's really, fantastic way of, social networks, faith-based organisations, people organize themselves around their common shared interests. And it's there. You don't see it, but it's there. I mean, when I was working in the NHS, I've worked with community to develop this asset map. And it's really fantastic picture of how community organize themselves and who influence, and what the influence within each community. So the organization, you need to understand the community, you need to understand, like our work we did with Zahra Haq around health and well-being. And she rightly said, the local authority, the NHS won't do that work because they don't have the skills, they don't have the knowledge, and they don't have the expertise. So for the organization to be effective, they need to work with the right people in the communities, and the community organize themselves. And when I said earlier about community at the default, and I'm not saying free default, it's about really co-designing and co-commissioning. So if you're going to work with communities, it's not just about going there and ask people to do things for free. It's recognizing people got the expertise and the skills, and it's valuable, and you have really to invest on that. And you have, rather than commissioning, multi-million organizations, you can work with organizations like Degbal and CAS and others who are really grassroots organizations. So you need to understand that knowledge. It takes time. It's not an easy answer. You have to go out there, identify people who influence. I mean, when I work in the NHS, for example, and you talked about the difficult topics in communities. There's no difficult topics if you've got the right people to speak to the people. I've done a lot of work around FGM, and when we started, nobody wanted to talk about it. But when we got the right people in the communities who can have that conversation within their own communities, it's become a day-to-day topics. Now, Bristol is one of the leading cities on tackling difficult issues around FGM, around domestic violence, around hate crime, because of just using the right people, and the people who have the influence and they have the connection. So you talk to one person, and next day that person will talk to 10 and then 100 people, so the message goes there. So there is a way of doing that, and there's asset in communities where people can access and can identify the right people if they want to.
And Martin, with Salaam Shalom, I think we know only too well that sometimes, we've witnessed difficult conversations around difficult subjects between Muslim and Jewish communities, but it's about the right context, the right environment, the right opportunities to have those kind of conversations, that kind of dialogue.
Yeah, and I think we're very fortunate in Bristol, in fact, that the different ethnic cultural groups here in the city do talk to one another, and remarkably, it seems, there's not the same tension on the university campuses as there is in other parts of Britain. But I think this has to be still worked at. You can't just take it for granted. Salaam Shalom and many organisations depend on volunteers, and volunteers can always say no. And when they move on, you need to make sure you've got another group of people behind you who are ready to run with the battle. And you have to do a lot of proving. I mean, just take Salaam Shalom. In both communities, the Jewish and the Muslim, why are you setting up an organisation like Salaam Shalom? Why do we need to talk to one another? Well, actually, we've got an awful lot to share, and we can then demonstrate a lot to other people. So, in fact, we then went out to work in schools, saying if Muslims and Jews can collaborate, we started, as you heard on screen, with that internet radio station, then in other cultural groups, people can talk to one another across boundaries. But you do it you have to work at it too. We learned early on, you can't just force people to talk together, and you can't assume that because they come from one background, they share a particular perspective. You need to get people, perhaps in a room, doing something like this, seeing those films on screen, and then you can talk about it, and then you can see there are similarities and there are differences. And we may not agree, but at least we can agree to disagree.
Thank you, Martin. I'm sure there's lots of questions. I'm going to open to the floor. So does anyone want to ask any of our panel members anything in relation to what we've discussed so far? We have a microphone, so just shove your hand in the air and we'll pass that to you. I should have put a plant in the audience, should I? Down at the front, one of our influencers.
It is not a question. It is a suggestion. When I say suggestion, my suggestion is that আপনারে লয়ে বিব্রত রহিতে আসে নাই কেহ অবনী পরে সকলের তোরে সকলে আমরা, প্রত্যেকেই আমরা পরের তোরে. How many people understood it? We are human beings. We are in this life not for ourselves. We got to be for each other. We got to be for the community. We got to be looking after yourself, not individually, communally as well. This is the some substance of this bit of poem I used to recite in my early life as well. Anyway, so this is my philosophy, yes, my philosophy, that do not just hide in yourself. Come forward and put forward what you think and what you think right and what you think will be beneficial to human being, for the community and for individually as well.
Thank you so much. I'm going to let Martin respond to that, actually.
Can I just say that of all the people we interviewed, Abdul, whom I've known for a very long time, was the one person I particularly wanted to have on record, because I think he's someone longer than anybody in the Asian community, the Muslim community here in Bristol, who's done so much for his community. He is the architect, if you pardon me using that word, not quite the right word, of the first mosque here in Bristol. He set up a number of community organizations. He hoped many years ago that there would be an Asian council with all the different Southeast Asian communities represented on it, and that proved impossible to set up. Then it failed because people just did not want to talk to one another and recognize a shared need. So I think that echoes, Abdul, the need for, exactly as you've just said, that kind of across cultural groups collaboration and cooperation. And in a way, that's slowly happening. We have many community organizations that were set up initially for a particular community group, and then both Zara and Saika have pointed out their organization has broadened, widened their range of services, the range of people who use their services. But as they say, there are lots of obstacles in making sure that people recognize that it's a good and safe and welcoming place to come to. We have to continue working at that. But Abdul, thank you for that, and I'm so delighted that you're able to. Abdul's not in good health, so I'm delighted he's able to be here with us this evening.
Thank you, Abdul. Is Madge here? Is she still here? She's at the back. Can I pass a microphone? Yeah, I'll take your question in 1 second. I just want to pass the microphone to Madge. I'm going to put you on the spot, Madge. One of the things that was talked about in the panel last night was about cities not losing their identity, and that sometimes, even though you have to discuss and acknowledge controversial aspects of the communities and the cultures within the community, that you shouldn't lose sight of that, and it actually strengthens the communities as they go forward, as they move into the future. Madge, you've dealt with some pretty controversial stuff around Bristol and around the history of Bristol. How much has that influenced the communities here and the way the city has developed?
Oh gosh, well, well, I've dealt with things around slavery and ethnicity, and now anti-Semitism and anti-racism. I think it's difficult. I think the good practice that we can evolve the community groups and all the great work and great practice that has been done by some of the people that you've outlined here needs to feed through and be coordinated and supported, because cities are much more influential. I think are much more able to respond to the needs of climate change, of anti-racism, etc., than national, state governments. They're sclerotic. They don't act. They don't do joined-up thinking. But what's worrying me a bit is the way that we're all in our little bubbles, particularly with gentrification. We're moving out. We're not living next to each other. We tend not to be exposed to the challenges that other groups face. And it's very hard also to speak about controversial issues, even between Muslims and Jews who have so much in common. And so I think we need to create safe spaces where difficult issues can be resolved. I've just come this morning from Whitchurch to a primary school talking about the slave trade to overwhelmingly white children who hardly ever get to the city center, let alone outside Bristol. But they were very alive to some of the issues about social justice. Everyone understands about equality and social justice, and you have to be seen to be listening to other people's experiences. And what we need to do is to give people safe spaces where they can exchange their experience and work to a common purpose. But I have to say that even as difficult as talking about slavery in this country is, it pales into insignificance when you talk about Muslim-Jewish relations in Israel and Palestine. I think that is the bullet we all have to bite. And what do we mean by Zionism, and what do we mean by oppression and social justice? And I think we need to have safe spaces to talk about that.
Madge, thank you very much indeed. I've got a question down here. If anyone else wants a question, just raise your hand. Go. Oh, hang on, we're just going to bring you the microphone. We've got about 10 minutes, so...
Thank you so much. The right leader, that means it is good communities. So, because I'm part of these communities, Sudanese communities, and as well, I'm going to link this question because I'm working as well as Stop Smoking Advisor. So, as you know, the young people mean the future for these communities. We have seen this community work hard, to be honest, and there is a lot of complicated issues behind these young people. But I'm going to talk about drugs and smoke, especially in the deprived area. So as a communities, how are you going to control this problem coming behind this behavior, smoking and drugs, especially the young people now?
Right.
We have seen a lot of problems coming behind this. So are the community leaders, how are you going to control these young people? I know already these communities work hard through imams, through leaders, through lectures, through a lot of activities.
Okay.
But still we need to know how you're going to develop this service to be able to stop these problems coming behind smoking and drugs.
Okay, so I guess the question actually is slightly broader. It may not just be smoking or some of the other specific issues. I guess the question is, should communities be controlling young people, or actually is it not about control? Is it something else?
Can I?
Yeah.
Perhaps the answer is one of our interviewees, Simi Chowdhury, who recognized early on that there were issues like that in her community that were not being talked about, that were being brushed under the carpet, no way of being able to do, it seemed, anything about it. She had to think very hard about how you overcome the barriers of getting, first of all, the community to accept that it's acceptable to discuss those issues in a reasoned way. So she had to work out, first of all, how to encourage women in the community to come forward to groups, then the men in the community, because, as you know, there are often barriers between different gender in any community about the issues that can be discussed. You then have to try and set up some kind of session that is not going to focus immediately on the issue, but is going to lead into the issue. And I think you heard on screen the one where she said she thought, my God, I've blown it, when the speaker sat down. And then there was, after a couple of minutes, a standing ovation for that speaker. You have to plan very carefully a strategy over time. And then, of course, it's the group that you want to address. You have to find ways of getting them to address it. Amir, one of our interviewees, people we interviewed would probably have said through scouting is one way in which you can ensure that these issues are covered and we can think about what the alternatives might be for young people. Of course, not every young person is going to want to be a scout, but that's one way in which you can perhaps lead into getting the community to think about the issue. Because I'm thinking when the scouting movement within the Muslim community got set up, it was with as it were, the elders of the community, not just the young people, not just for you. It's we want to bring your parents in to know about what's going on, to talk about the kind of issues you're going to cover, to help run the place.
So, very briefly, because I'm just looking at the time and we are tight for time, you both also have dealt with youth issues. There's no, presumably, there's no silver bullet, but is there anything, again, along with that kind of advice?
It's probably very similar, just you have to work together.
Yeah.
You have to work together, but it is...
You have to, can you just...
Going on from what Martin was saying, yes, we have to work together to deal with these issues. I mean, our organisation doesn't deal with issues like drugs or other issues like this because the children that we work with are actually disabled. And what we provide for them is activities. Yeah. No, I do understand that, but I think as a community we all need to work together to deal with these issues.
Okay. Mohammed, briefly.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about young people, but we don't talk to young people. And I think it's more about having this conversation with the young people about, the changing. I mean, I've done a lot of work with young people who are involved in drugs, and I remember I've done a workshop with some of the young people who hung around and they're involved in drugs. And I said, why do you do it? And you know what the answer was? They said to me, the drug dealers are the equal opportunity employees. They give you the job as long as you can do it. They're not going to look at your CV, they're not going to look at your color, they're not going to look at your religion. You do the job, you get the job. So it's about social justice, about opportunity for young people as well. So young people, in the city, and we're talking about the future of the cities, and I think we have an unequal city, and that's reality. We have people and we have communities who have no access to opportunity or employment. We have issues around education, we have issues around training. So if we're going to answer this, we need to think about the wider issues around social justice and opportunity for young people as well, because as I said, part of it is people have no opportunity. I mean, I think a lot of young people I spoke to, and I said to some young people hanging around, they said, I want to see you an MP. Why not? There is an opportunity. They need that community giving them the opportunity to think beyond what's happening now. And I think that's our responsibility as parents, but also as a communities, which is we need to be role models. We need to inspire young people to think beyond that level now.
Okay. I'm really conscious of time. We're under strict instructions by Futurecity, so I know we've got 5 more minutes. I'm going to take one more question, if that's okay, from Phil, who put his hand up. Hopefully we can answer it briefly.
Thank you, Peter. I'll keep it very, very brief, and I think it'll probably just elicit one line from each of your panel there. I'm Phil Gibbons, and I've been blessed over many years. I've worked with most of the panel here and a lot of the people in the film and quite a few people in the room as well in various different projects. I now work for the Catholic Church as head of media and communications. A lot of what I do is reactive to a situation. I then have to try and spin that to a proactive way forward. I just wonder if there's any golden rules. Mohammed, you're a great exponent of this, I know, with what you do with the Muslim people in Bristol, with the iftars and everything, St Mark's Road. But it's normally reacting to something. And Peter and Martin, as soon as you hear the word anti-Jew or whatever, Labour Party, we expect a statement from the Jews in Bristol. But how can you turn that negative into a proactive way of trying to get the communities engaged in the first place before the dialogue even happens?
Okay. One, turning a negative into a positive. One Very quick solution.
For us, because of time, I'm not able to share with you, but we had a youth project as well. There were young boys who were excluded from schools, who were also drug dealing, you know. We started having conversations with them and also working with schools. So it's very important to work as a multi-agency, you know, and that's how we got through, you know. So it's about early intervention, but have dialogues, have conversation, and giving people safe space where, you know, they can share with you about what they are going through. Yeah.
So proactive conversation. Mohammed, very briefly.
I think it's a very, very difficult one, but it's more about, you know, active citizenship, about people taking more proactive role in their life. I mean, regardless what's happening in the city, we all have a role, and we don't need to wait to the time when we need to react. We need to be proactive. We need to. I think it's all about, you know. I think for me, the whole work around Muslim for Bristol is not about being reaction. It's about really activating that citizenship, and people see the city is our country, and we need to be more proactive.
I think you should be an MP, by the way.
Right, so Mohammed for president. Saika.
Mayor.
Or mayor. No. You have a good mayor.
Being non-judgmental and listening.
Non-judgmental and listening. Okay. Martin.
You're very right. And actually, Salaam Shalom has had 2 programs in schools, proud to be for primary school children and something called Resistance for secondary school children, where we wanted them to learn about each other's culture and in secondary schools learn to be resistors on any kind of issue within the community that's going to be destructive. The hard part about it is schools love it because it's an adjunct to the curriculum, but they can't afford to pay for it, and we can't get the funding to deliver it. So we're back to our original question. It's somehow or other you've got to decide that these things are so important that actually you are going to find a way of making sure they are delivered.
Okay. I'm going to have to draw a line under that. I want, again, one line and one line only. One of last night's panellists sort of struggled with the word hope. She preferred the word determination. Either hope or determination. What's your determination and hope for Bristol's communities in a line?
For my organisation, I hope we carry on and we serve the disabled children of Bristol.
To leave a legacy, you know, for future people, young people to take it further. Yeah.
I think every cultural group in Bristol has a fantastic amount within its own community, but doesn't yet think, hang on, the rest of Bristol needs to know about us. And I think I've been struggling with that one for a long time, and I think that's terribly important. Obviously, there are big issues within their community, but the rest of us won't know what those issues are unless they come and tell us, and we can't actually put on art stuff that reaches out to that community unless we know what's going to appeal.
Thank you. Mohammed.
I think for Bristol to be the city we aspire to, a city equal to everybody, nobody's left behind in the city, but also, you know, building on the fantastic work done by the pioneers. Abdul Wahab, they laid the foundation for us. It's an opportunity to take that to the next level.
So let me start by thanking our panellists, thanking Saika Khan, thanking Zira Haq, Mohammed El Sharif and Martin Vagoda. Thank you all.